your answers today. If you've got nutritional questions you'd like to ask, fire those away into the comment section, and we'll get our best, do our best to get them answered today. If you're new to the show, you've got to check out, come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org, where we house all of our wonderful free information. It's a free service to you to navigate nutrition and diet and lifestyle changes to overcome autoimmunity. And go over there and get on our newsletter, and it's free. We'll send you a bunch of information to help you conquer and win at health. Now, let's dive into your questions. Let's see here. Marie Hope says, I hired a mold person. One of the tests came back saying I have high levels of penicillium in the HVAC. Your thoughts on this? What do you recommend? That's a great question, Marie. Penicillium is a mold that produces several different types of mold toxins that can make people very, very sick. That being said, you've got to ask a second question to those people that found it. You have to ask the question why it grew. Mold grows because of moisture. So there's a problem with your HVAC system maintaining proper humidity. And so you've got to get that diagnosed, because if you clean that mold out of your HVAC, it's just going to come right back, and you don't want that to happen. So there's a humidity problem. There are a number of different reasons that could be, but I would ask your mold inspector who found that mold for a referral to a solid, reputable HVAC company who also understands mold and who understands moisture imbalance within the system. That's what you have to do next, because if you don't figure that out, you can't clean it enough times. It'll just keep coming back. Okay. You recently covered a lot of amino acids. Which one helped with the electrolytes movement in the brain? What would the effect of electrolytes being balanced in the brain? So let's take question number one first. So as far as movement of electrolytes into the brain, predominantly arginine is going to be helpful for that because of its vasodilation properties. It dilates blood vessels and helps deliver nutrients to tissue. And so that being said, part two of the question, what would the effect be of electrolytes being balanced in the brain? I mean, electrolytes need to be balanced everywhere, not just in the brain. But I mean, if you're electrolyte deficit, your brain neurons are not going to fire as quickly, because your brain axons, which are the long bodies of tissue that extend off of a nerve cell, are like wires. They communicate to other wires or other axons in your brain. And so if those don't have adequate electrolytes, they're not going to depolarize properly, and you're going to have brain misfires and miscommunications. So as far as having good electrolyte balance in the brain, better memory, better word cognition, better focus, better concentration, all of those things would be expectations of correcting electrolyte imbalance. Can the brain heal dead or damaged neurons? How to support the healing process of the brain? The brain can heal. The brain has plasticity. Now, years ago, it was said that nerve cells don't heal, brain cells don't recover or repair, and that was disproven with the concept of something called neural plasticity. They have the ability to heal and repair. Now, one of the key core fundamental nutrients required for brain healing, if you've had damaged brain, this is why if you've ever listened to me talk about brain trauma, traumatic brain injury, I talk about omega-3 fish oil. Very important. And you need to get upwards of 8 grams post-traumatic brain injury a day, 8 grams a day, to help support your recovery. So why? Omega-3 stimulates the production of a key hormone in your brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. Very important hormone. It is what heals your brain cells and allows them to recover and repair. Omega-3 stimulates BDNF. And so you've got to make sure that omega-3 is in your diet. And if you're looking for nutritional support, again, about 8 grams a day. And if you're doing this, you need to have a good doctor monitoring you and watching over you. Okay. Oh, I like this. Doc, you provide much amazing information. Is it difficult wanting to share with people who really need what you have to offer and they'd rather eat bagels? Arg. It took me a while to go no grain too. Not really. Everybody, you got to meet people where they're at. I've had there's several doctors in the internet sphere of influence around diet and lifestyle. A lot of us have differing opinions. We have differing experiences clinically. We don't see eye to eye on everything, but we all generally see that educating people is the core to helping empower them to make better changes. And you've got to meet people where they're at. And sometimes people are at bagels. And so my message might be too strong for those individuals. For example, my message is no grain. Don't eat grain. Not just gluten, not just wheat, barley, and rye, but no grain at all. Some people can't hear that. They're just that paralyzes them. And so my friend Tom O'Brien, who talks about gluten as well, is a good doc. He doesn't put it that way. He has a kind of I call it a milder message. It's not that it's necessarily milder. It's just not as restricted in terms of diet. And so somebody might be more ready to hear his message than they are to hear mine. But when they go through his messaging and they are feeling better, doing better, realizing that diet change can have an impact on their health, but they're still struggling in some aspect, now maybe they're ready for my information. They're ready to take that next jump or that next evolution. So, people are going to be where they're at, and some people never get there, and that's okay too. We all have autonomous ability to make decisions. That's why I'm so pro education, and I try not to judge, because you just never know what somebody else is going through, or what kind of things they're dealing with. So, thanks for the question. I'm a 53-year-old female carnivore for more than a year. I'm on the 3-day of creating roading. I don't know what you mean, the 3-day of creating roading. What am I missing there? Is that a misspell or a typo, or did Google respell something that you meant? Maybe re-ask the question for me. Let's see. BJ says, "Hi, Dr. O. Great talk again. Wouldn't it be interesting to know how many of his patients have mycotoxins in their systems?" Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting. That talk BJ's talking about, my interview that I did with Dr. Greenblatt on Tuesday. So those of you maybe who missed that interview, we talked about, he's a psychiatrist, a functional psychiatrist, and the message that basically that he shared with us is test, don't guess. When you're dealing with psychiatric disease like bipolar and anxiety and ADHD, et cetera, you need to know a person's nutritional status. You need to change their diet. And you need to know whether they're lacking vitamins and minerals, because those are the key factors in building brain chemicals that help people think clearly. And so we got along really, really well in that regard, because we see eye to eye. But whether or not he's doing mycotoxin or mold collabs, it's hard to say. Most doctors aren't there yet, I would say. And, even I would say that about myself. Several years ago, I was looking at it and thinking about it, but having gone through it, I'm looking at it and thinking about it probably more than anyone has ever looked or thought about it. Let's see, Kimberly, could my genetic celiac diagnosis have been triggered by GMOs in the 1990s? I follow a strict gluten-free, dairy-free, grain-free diet, yet still have terrible nausea and vomiting episodes that land me dehydrated in the ER every few months, sometimes weeks. Also, I've been diagnosed with major depressive disorder with anxiety and panic attacks. What could it be? You need to get your micronutrient status checked, Kimberly. Can we put that link up? The micronutrient. So most doctors won't measure this. Most doctors don't understand nutrition. They don't teach it in med school, and they're certainly not going to promote it. It's just not something they do, not something they're trained in. And you and the audience need to realize that if you're asking your doctor to help you nutritionally and they're not trained in nutrition, you're not going to get nutritional help. Testing is very, very important, because, Kimberly, those symptoms that you're talking about, that could very simply be vitamin deficiencies. Like, what comes to my mind is folate deficiency, vitamin B12 deficiency. And sometimes what happens with celiac disease is you damage your villi so extensively that they scar, they flatten. And now for the rest of your life, you have malabsorption issues where your gut doesn't absorb vitamins and minerals as efficiently as it used to before the damage. And if that's you, you need to be having your nutrition status checked every 6 months. It needs to be part of your checkup with your doctor. And again, find a good nutritional doctor to do that with. But it could be that simple. I've seen it be that simple, where depression and B12 go hand in hand, and anxiety and B12 go hand in hand. Throwing up and B12 deficiency can go hand in hand. So I just say that because that's low-hanging fruit you can try, but really you need to go get tested. Debbie's asking, is there any relationship between gluten and bipolar disease? And the answer is absolutely yes. As a matter of fact, gluten, we know, causes brain inflammation. More recent studies have shown that brain inflammation kind of relays depression and bipolar disease and even schizophrenic or schizoaffective disorders. If you want to learn more about gluten and bipolar, go visit Gluten Free Society. I have some fantastic research articles about that very topic and some videos about that topic as well that you might want to check out. But there's definitely a relationship. TC asks, what is pancreatitis? How do you get rid of it? And what supports and harms the pancreas? That's a lot of questions. That's three questions. What is pancreatitis? It's inflammation. Itis means inflammation. Pancreas, pancreas. So it's inflammation of the pancreas. The pancreas is an organ that sits kind of laterally near your stomach or across your stomach, where this organ is responsible for a few different things. Number one, it makes insulin. So it helps you produce the insulin that regulates your blood sugar. Number two, it makes digestive enzymes, and it pushes those digestive enzymes through a duct system into your intestines so that you can properly digest your food. Number three, the pancreas also produces something called bicarbonate, which is a base that neutralizes stomach acid so that your stomach acid doesn't burn a hole through your intestine. So pancreas is a pretty important organ. If it's inflamed, those functions can be compromised. And so there are a lot of things that can cause pancreatic inflammation. Alcohol is definitely at the top of that list. I've seen gluten do it. I've seen mold and mold toxins do it. I've seen nutritional deficiencies contribute to pancreatitis, vitamin C deficiency, also vitamin B12 as examples. So, you want to support your pancreas by being well nourished and not overwhelming it. Now, some people overwhelm their pancreas by over consuming carbohydrate. Why? Because the pancreas has to make insulin in response to your carbohydrate intake. And if you're eating a ton of sugar, you're eating a ton of processed, ultra processed foods that are loaded with corn syrup and other sugars, that's going to work your pancreas much harder. Additionally, if you're eating too much food, if you're overeating, if you're overweight, you eat too many calories than what your body needs, you're putting more demand on your pancreas, because remember, your pancreas also has to produce digestive enzymes to help you break that food down. So eating the right amount of food, eating healthy food are the best ways really nutritionally to support your pancreas. And beyond that, it's unique to the individual. Everyone eats differently. Everyone has different lifestyles and behaviors that could contribute to different types of nutritional problems. And so, in my opinion, testing and not guessing at those becomes an important part of good whole maintenance of nutrition. So we talked about nutritional testing a minute ago. I think we put that link in, but maybe we can put it in. I don't know if we put it in. We put it in on YouTube, but I don't know if we can put it on Facebook too. Do you personally have experience with using lithium orotate? Yes. I have a lot of experience with it. We've been using it for a number of years. As far as depression and apathy and anxiety, I would say it works probably of those three, probably the best I've seen it help with is anxiety. It really helps to kind of calm the angst for a lot of people. It also can help with clarity. Like just clarity of thought, clarity of mind. We're going to be doing a crash course on lithium this year, so stay tuned for that. But it's a very important mineral that is largely ignored. Even now today, even in psychiatry, it's largely ignored because other drugs have taken over. The use of lithium. Lithium, at one point in psychiatry was a common prescription used for those different types of disorders. I just got results of your DNA test. It was positive for DQ2 and DQ1. How serious is this? I was tested for celiac through blood and it came back negative. PK, it's serious because you have two markers for gluten sensitivity, which is, remember what the test is measuring is genetic predisposition. So you should tune into one of our webinars on the topic because I think visuals would help you understand it a lot better. But these genes code for a receptor on the surface of your lymphocytes, your white blood cells. This receptor's job is to help your immune system recognize good things from bad things so that you don't attack good things. Well, people with positive genetics on their HLA-DQ gene for gluten, genetically will recognize gluten as a foreign agent, not as a food. And so what happens is your immune system is seeing your food as a potential threat, and it's trying to make chemicals to neutralize it. These chemicals are antibodies and other inflammatory chemicals to neutralize the threat. It's not the one piece of bread consumption that hurts a person with a gluten issue. It's the lifelong consumption in the presence of the ignorance of not knowing whether or not you need to be gluten-free. We know that people, for example, with gluten sensitivity who ignore it, they increase their mortality rate tremendously. They increase their disease rates tremendously, the autoimmune development. And these types of diseases take time to develop. So it's not acutely life-threatening to have HLA-DQ positivity on gluten. But if you ignore it, it's lifelong. It will shave years off of your life, and it will add disease to your life. And many of those diseases get misdiagnosed. They don't get associated with gluten. And so then your doctor wants to put you on medicines to treat the symptoms of those illnesses, when in fact, in reality, all you would have needed to do would be change your diet and the inflammation would go away. So I would say it's serious. We have an article on is gluten fatal? I don't know if we can put that on. That's on that person's on either TikTok or Insta. But if you go visit glutenfreesociety.org and type in "is gluten fatal," you'll pull up, and there's tons of research and research studies that we wrote this kind of comprehensive piece about the danger of gluten and not knowing, that I think will really help you have better context around that question. Let's see, Pebble says, is Effexor bad for you? Yes. Now I'll probably take a lot of flack for that. This is not me giving you medical advice, by the way. If you're on Effexor and you're prescribed by your doctor, you need to have that conversation with your doctor. That being said, Effexor it's an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. SSRIs contribute to B vitamin deficiency and calcium deficiency, so they can cause malnutrition over time the longer you're on them, but they can also create a tremendous addiction. They also don't fix the reason that, if you're taking it for depression, some people take it for depression, some people take it for pain management. It just depends on why you're on it. But bottom line is, a chemical doesn't fix your problem, it masks it. And if you had, imagine if you had mold growing on your wall and you put a picture over that and you didn't fix it. You didn't fix why the mold was growing. You just hung a picture over it to hide it. It doesn't mean that mold isn't releasing chemical toxins and hurting you. Just means it's out of your sight. And that's what medicines are. They're just out of mind, out of sight. They suppress your symptoms so that you can, have a quality of life that you're after without fixing your problem. And ultimately, your body breaks faster as a result. No one was ever cured by chemical manipulation of symptoms without seeking the origin of their problem, ever. And the only drugs, to my knowledge, that actually really cure anything is an antibiotic if you have an infection. I mean, they're definitely curative if you have something like that, or an antifungal if you have a fungal infection, et cetera. But drugs that treat chronic inflammation, that treat the symptoms of chronic inflammation, you're spinning your wheels and you're lying to yourself. I mean, it's funny, it's interesting that we look at the Greek root of the word pharmacy. It's magic. You're pulling a magic trick. What is magic? Magic is a lie, because it's actually a trick, right? And so when you think about it that way, maybe that gives you better context, at least from word salad on it. Let's see. What do you recommend for dry eyes? Figuring out why you have them. Dry eyes had come with a reason. If you have Sjogren's, which is an autoimmune condition that affects your lacrimal glands and causes dryness, then you got to figure out what's triggering your autoimmunity. If you just have general dry eyes because you're getting, you're maybe using a contact solution, wearing your contacts too long, maybe you're out in the sun for too long, maybe you have seasonal allergies, and that's leading to some dryness and some irritation. So it just depends. But there's not I don't recommend an eyedropper and call it even. You've got to figure out why the eyes are dry in the first place. Stopped gluten in all the foods that I'm intolerant to, took probiotics for a long time. But my second food intolerance test came back worse than my first one. Any ideas? It depends on the food intolerance test. They're not all equal. Some of them you get what we call false positives. And so a lot of people, they get their results back and they have a lot more things they're having to avoid than what they should. And so it just would depend on the type of testing that you're using. You may not actually truly have those allergies. How many days does it take for your gut lining to renew? 2 to 7, Belinda. The turnover of the gut, 2 to 7 days. That's the lining of the gut, not months, not weeks. If you've been on a protocol and you've worked with somebody and you're fixing your gut for 6 months or a year, it's probably because you're missing something. You're missing triggers. Let's see here. So Tika says, I'm from Ethiopia and I'm gluten sensitive. Please share any advice of what I can do. Tika, take our glutenology crash course. We put a link up to glutenology. Take our course. It's 14 hours long. It will give you all the tools and expertise and knowledge to navigate the gluten-free diet successfully. We made it because there's so much misinformation and confusion around the topic, but that's, I would highly recommend the glutenology. And that's true for any of those of you watching that are kind of gluten-free, still struggling, and you don't know why. We've got chapters in that class on those very things, like why you're still struggling, what you could be doing wrong, etc. So if you haven't taken glutenology, highly encourage it. Can you have celiac disease if you don't have the gene? And if you do have the gene and eat clean, do you still have celiac and will react to it eventually, guaranteed? Great question, Karen. So 99% of all celiacs have HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8 gene patterns, 99%. Now, there is 1% that don't. The question mark, though, is no one's ever taken that 1% and looked at whether they actually had celiac disease or whether they had some other precondition that caused villus atrophy, because celiac disease in medicine is defined as, the criteria for diagnosis is that you have to have positive villus atrophy along with what's called positive serology, meaning your blood has to have antibodies to either gliadin or anti-endomysial antibodies or what are called tissue transglutaminase antibodies. The problem is that gluten can suppress the immune system. So using serology and measuring antibodies, oftentimes you get false negative. And so this is where a lot of people get misdiagnosed, is they're immunosuppressed, their antibody tests come back normal, so the doctor never orders a biopsy to see if they have villus atrophy. So that's one of the flaws. Now, if your serology comes back positive, you could go do a biopsy and it may be negative. And the problem with the biopsy is it's a microscopic cross-section of your small intestine, meaning your small intestine is as big, the surface area is as big as a tennis court. And when you do biopsies, you're taking 4 little tiny microscopic parts of a tennis court, and then you're making the assumption that those 4 little microscopic parts are representative of the entire tennis court. And so you may have damage in a different location. You may have villus atrophy somewhere where they didn't take the biopsy. And so a lot of times biopsies come back falsely negative as well. So first, I say all that to say there's flaws in the diagnostic criteria for understanding celiac disease diagnosis. Now, that being said, there are other things that can cause villus atrophy that are not gluten. For example, chronic steroid use, chronic NSAID use can cause villus atrophy. Vitamin B3 deficiency can cause villus atrophy. Parasites can cause villus atrophy. Other B vitamin deficiencies like B12 can cause villus atrophy. Certain blood pressure medications can cause villus atrophy. So there's not one cause for villus atrophy, and villus atrophy is the gold standard for diagnosing celiac disease. And doctors generally, when they're trying to make that diagnosis, they're not asking those other questions. That's been my experience anyway. And so I know I maybe didn't answer your question perfectly, but the bottom line is 99% of all celiacs have HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8. If you have a DQ2, DQ8, DQ1, DQ3, you are predisposed to react to gluten. So you should probably avoid it if you want to be healthy. That being said, if you're avoiding it, you're not going to develop celiac disease if you're avoiding it, because the cause of celiac disease is gluten. And that's very clear. So if you're avoiding gluten, you're not going to get celiac disease, but you could still get villus atrophy from something else. And it could be construed as celiac disease if you have the wrong doctor who doesn't rule out other variable factors that might also cause villus atrophy. How can my wife start gaining more weight and muscle and make her bones stronger? Eat enough food, the right food, working out. That's really, it's that simple. I know, and maybe I oversimplified it, but a big part of it is how many calories a day is your wife eating? Is she eating enough? Because there's a lot of pressure in our society to fast, and especially in the health arena, to do fasting, intermittent fasting. For women, there's a lot of pressure in society to lose weight, and so a lot of women undereat. In that kind of attempt. I don't know where your wife falls. It sounds like she's probably underweight, or at least she's under muscled. But the calories and the protein calories have to be there if you're trying to put on bone and muscle. And if you're not eating enough protein, you're going to struggle to put on muscle and bone. And if you're not exercising, you're also going to struggle. Let's see. How many drops of silver do you put in your neti pot? I tried one and it was too hot and had to stop. Depends on your silver, Karen. Which kind of silver? If you're using our hydrolyzed silver, start with one and you can work your way up from there. But if it was hot, it could mean you're having a microbial interaction with that silver and the bacteria, and that can create a Herxheimer response that might lead to some symptoms. So, that is a possibility. Where do you buy your wild salmon? I think the name of the company is Wild Alaska. We used to buy it at Vital Choice, but they sold to, I can't remember who they sold to. This is flowers.com or cookies.com or something like that. And anytime I knew the owner of Vital Choice. He's a great guy. But anytime a smaller company sells to a bigger company, it's just a matter of time before they start compromising integrity and quality in the work of what they do. Would it be okay for me to pour your vitamin C powder out of the plastic bottle into a glass container? It would be, but if you're going to do that, make sure the glass container is dark glass and make sure you have a good seal on it, a good airtight seal. Because once you expose, that to air prolongedly or to light prolongedly, it'll start to oxidize and it'll start turning yellow on you and it'll start crystallizing. And so you'll lose shelf life in that regard, but you can make that transference. Again, just make sure the glass bottle is dark. Have you tried the grain-free, dairy-free, sugar-free diet and taken TUDCA and oxbol salts and gotten all seed oils out of your diet? That's a comment for somebody else. That's good advice. Does gluten cause bipolar disease? I think I answered that one already. Do you have a spike detox formula? If not, what supplements from GFS would support that? Definitely NAC, N-acetylcysteine. So we have something called Ultra NAC. We also have a product called Matrizyme. Maybe we can put links up for these. Matrizyme, Matrizyme. And it's a proteolytic enzyme. I would also suggest glutathione. We have something called Ultra Glutathione in that regard. And I would also suggest vitamin C. One of the things we know from Dr. Hazen's work is that spike can deteriorate bifidobacter, and vitamin C helps to rebuild that. So that may be part, a lot of people with that's a part of the recovery process. What foods or nutrients are most helpful for clearing environmental toxins? Microplastics. Is anything better than broccoli sprouts? Lots of things are better than broccoli sprouts. I mean, that's not to say that broccoli sprouts and the sulforaphane in them can't be useful or helpful for the liver, but I wouldn't put that at the best. B vitamins are, especially methylated B vitamins, are tremendously important in detoxification from the environment. So methylfolate, methylcobalamin, as well, vitamin B1, vitamin B6, vitamin B2, vitamin B5, all play a role in detoxification. And then, of course, to me, where a lot of people miss, you're trying to detox with pills. Those are what we call passive detox. and that's okay. I'm not against it. Certainly, it can be useful. But the best way to detox is not to retox. So quit using microplastics, quit using things in plastics, as much as you can. Don't heat your food up in it. Don't eat off of plastic silverware. Don't drink out of plastic linings. When you're buying things, try to buy things without the BPA and all the other linings that are inside, like the cans and other products that you might use. But sweat. You want to detox? Sweat. It's the best way. If you stay hydrated, and so part of detox is having adequate water, because water flushes it out. Water cleans. So getting adequate hydration so that you're urinating frequently enough to cleanse, and then also sweating. The body gets rid of a lot of toxins through sweat, and making sure your bowels are running and working smoothly. If you're constipated, you're not detoxifying. You've got 4 major detoxification pathways. You detoxify through your bowel, through your kidneys. Your kidneys filter your blood, and your liver certainly helps detox. But your 4 channels are your lungs, your skin, your urinary tract, and your GI tract. So those 4 areas we call your outer holes, right? Those things that they wanted to cover us up. They wanted us to cover up all our holes during the pandemic, which was why it was such a bad mistake, because you're covering up your detoxification capacity, among other things. But anyway, that's aside from the point. You want it. This is why you want to practice deep breathing, and you want to make sure you're not shallow breathing or forgetting to breathe. This is why you want to have regular bowel movements. This is why you want to sweat daily, and this is why you want to make sure you're hydrated and you're urinating, on a regular basis to get things out of you. And then as far as nutrients are concerned, choline is fantastic. B vitamins are fantastic. There's plenty of foods that contain antioxidants that help your liver. Artichoke is an example of that. Broccoli is an example of that. CoQ10 is an important nutrient in that pathway, in that process. So lots of things to unpack around detoxification. If you haven't already, go watch my detox class. We did a master class on that. Gosh, it was a number of months ago. For lithium orotate, what's a basic recommended daily dose? Anywhere between 2.5 and 10 milligrams a day. Depending, I would say, if you're unsure about it, start low and work your way up accordingly. Granddaughter, who's 8 years old, has so many urinary tract infections it keeps recurring. Doctor keeps giving her antibiotics. Told her to do the Candida test, and pediatrician refuses this test. Yeah, doctors are so ignorant when it comes to yeast. What's your granddaughter eat, Laura? Because it's my experience with kids, they eat a lot of sugar. Their diets are poor. And as long as a kid is eating overly processed foods and carbohydrates and sugars, you're basically, if these are bacterial urinary tract infections, bacteria love sugar, so your blood becomes a petri dish for microbial growth. So you got to change the diet. If it's fungal, the same is true. Sugar can drive that as well. So you might just talk to your daughter's parents, your kids, on the potential, because it's very safe even in an 8-year-old to use diagnose, which is a supplemental that can make the tubules of the urinary tract slippery, so it makes it harder for bacteria to stay and adhere. So it helps basically flush out the urinary tract. It's a detox of sorts for the urinary tract, and that is, for many people, is extremely helpful. You might also consider a really strong probiotic for her, something along the lines of we have a product called Biotic Defense that would be ample. In that type of situation, those things can be done, especially if they're pumping her full of antibiotics, because sometimes the urinary tract infection originally is bacterial, and they treat it, then it comes back, but it's no longer bacterial. It's actually now fungal, because the number one side effect of taking an antibiotic is a fungal infection. And so, this is where you treat one thing and you end up with another, and then the doctor makes assumptions. But the best way to know is to do testing. It's to do a culture sensitivity of the urine and culture it for yeast and candida as well. You might also fire that doctor and go see a different one and get a second opinion. What helps with neural inflammation other than NAC and omega-3? It's not that you want to take more for neural inflammation. You want to find out why you have neural inflammation. There's 4 triggers of inflammation, including neuroinflammation: food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies. And so the best way to go about that is to measure those 4 categories, because in some cases, the best way to get rid of neuroinflammation is to change your behavior, not to take a pill. So, test, don't guess. A lot of celiac disease people leave gluten, but rice also have gluten as per you. Does legumes also, like chickpea? So in essence, the question is, are chickpeas gluten-free? And the answer is yes, chickpeas are gluten-free. I have tingling in my hand, feet, and back. My B6 is high. They said B6 deficiency causes tingling in feet and hand. What's the solution? So I don't know what your solution is, but if your B6 was high, it depends on how they measured it. Did they measure it in your serum? Are you supplementing with B vitamins? Did you have numbness and tingling in your hands, feet, and back before you started the B vitamins? Because if that all started before you were supplementing with B vitamins, probably not B6 toxicity. A lot of times B6 toxicity is misdiagnosed when a person is taking B6 at higher doses to treat or to try to treat their neuropathy, and then they go get their blood done and their doctor says, oh my gosh, your B6 is high, you probably have B6 toxicity. And then they pin the B6 toxicity on the neuropathy when the neuropathy existed before the B6 was ever even taken. That doesn't mean B6 can't cause toxicity and neuropathy. It can, but not so much if you're taking the pyridoxal 5-phosphate form or the P5P form. If you're taking pyridoxine hydrochloride as a B6 supplement, now too high of a dose of that can be contributory to neuropathy. So I don't know what your solution is. There's not enough context in your question for me to do any deeper than I've already done. Can you detox if you're very weak? You're always detoxing, so it's not, can you get on a detoxification support protocol or program when you're super weak? You probably could, but you would want to make sure, first and foremost, that you're out of the environment or no longer being exposed to the things that you're trying to detox from your body. And you might want to consider going in at a lower level, right? Sometimes doctors get aggressive with detox, and if they put you on too much too quickly, it's just not something that not everyone can handle it. So you have to go in sometimes knowing that and having good communication with your doctor so that that can be adjusted. But the fundamental aspect of that question is, can you detox if you're weak? The better question for me, in my opinion, to ask would be, why are you weak? Are you weak because you are full of toxins, or are you weak for some other reason? Did somebody investigate why you were weak and give you reasons as to why that is, and send you on the right path to help with that? Because if you're weak and you're just assuming I need to detox because detox is healthy and I want to get strong, that may not be the right move. What do you suggest for gum disease? Number 1, vitamin C, hands down. Most gums and gum inflammation is scurvy. A lot of people don't understand this, but scurvy is super common. I see scurvy 3 or 4 times a week in my practice. It's very, very common in today's world. People just aren't eating enough vitamin C. And I see it actually a lot in people with carnivore. Their vitamin C levels are on the floor because they're just not eating anything that has substantial amounts of it. Now, that being said, vitamin C is necessary to form collagen in the gums, and this is why the gums can bleed repetitively with gum inflammation or gingivitis, because there's not enough vitamin C in the diet to form healthy, strong, elastic collagen for the gums. Other than that, there's just a number of different things that you would want to make sure that you're doing, and not eating sugar or processed foods, because those destroy the microbiome in your mouth and can lead to gingival inflammation as well. You can also have deficiencies in specific nutrients like copper, folate, and B12 are necessary for collagen. Certain protein amino acids are important for the formation of collagen, like lysine and proline. So a lot of things that could potentially be helpful there. But start with diet change. I would say any of you that have undetermined cause of inflammation, you're not sure, what's the best diet to follow? The no grain, no pain diet. And if this is the first time you're hearing it, go get a copy of No Grain, No Pain and read it and follow the diet for 30 days and then get back with me. And I would love to hear what happened to your inflammation, because it probably either dramatically reduced or went away. Let's see here. How to reverse PCOS. PCOS is diabetes. It's just another way to say it. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is diabetes of the ovaries. So if you have PCOS, it's because you're diabetic. Nobody's told you that yet. That's why they treat PCOS in medicine with diabetic medications like metformin. You need to get your blood sugar under control. That means diet change. Follow No Grain, No Pain. Get your vitamin and mineral status checked, Simon. You may have a chromium deficiency or a zinc or a B3 deficiency. Those all play a role and contribute to elevated blood glucose. And so you've got to get those things measured and corrected. Any natural remedy for POTS? Gluten-free diet, I would say for sure. I've seen a lot of people with POTS do really, really well going gluten-free. Also, vitamin B12. Look into vitamin B12. Measure your B12 levels because B12 deficiency is very, very common in POTS, and people that get that corrected oftentimes report feeling tremendously better. How to reverse Sjogren's? Carrie's asking. You've got to understand that Sjogren's is autoimmune and that there are 4 triggers for autoimmune disease, categories of triggers: food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies. If you want to beat an autoimmune disease, you have to work with a doctor who can test those 4 categories and give you a blueprint so that you can change your diet and your lifestyle. If you don't, your only other options are not to treat the Sjogren's to remission, it's to treat the symptoms of the Sjogren's. And those options aren't very great. I mean, those options, the biologic medications, the steroids and other things, come with tremendous consequence. The side effects are tremendous for many of these medications, and some of them, including death, are the side effects. I mean, early death and cancer. So you don't want, I mean, a lot of the people now are being treated with these new class of biologic medications, which shut off your immune system. That's how they work. And, you know, you need your immune system to fight cancer and to fight other illnesses. And so shutting it off is not the answer so that you can feel better today. You need to figure out what your triggers are so that you don't have to medicate your immune system into remission. Which type of mold did you and your family battle with in your house? I have. And have you seen any link between spray foam insulation and mold? Trying to make a decision on spray foaming insulation after watching a video saying it's a mold hazard. That's a good point. It's a good question. In my home, we didn't have any spray foam insulation, Vanessa, in our home. We had penicillium, we had aspergillus, we had chitomium, we had stachybotrys, and we had fusarium, and we had cladosporium at high levels in my house. And we had every variety of mycotoxins being produced by those in our bodies and also on our furnishings. When we tested our furnishings, they came back positive for mycotoxin contamination as well. So as far as spray mold is concerned, is spray mold a risk factor for, I say that wrong, is spray foam a risk factor for mold? And the answer is not really. Spray foam improperly applied is a risk factor for mold. So what happens a lot of times is they don't properly prep the area. And this is why you want to hire an expert in spray foam who knows what they're doing, because if the area is not properly prepped, you can get either inadequate foam. And so you can with inadequate foam, you don't create a full barrier, and that can be problematic as far as water vapor is concerned. But in addition, where they say spray foam can be a risk for mold is that if you spray what is called closed foam insulation or closed cell foam, it's watertight. And if you put a couple of inches of that there, and then you get a roof leak, and that watertight foam is holding that water, next to your roof, you can start getting some mold that can manifest between the spray foam and the wood joists of your roof. That's a possibility, but it's also a possibility you could get a leak without spray foam and have mold grow too. So I wouldn't put spray foam in the category of worse necessarily, especially if you have a metal roof, because metal roofs are a lot less likely to spring leaks versus, say, shingle roofs. But if you're trying to make that decision, I would talk to people in your area who have used it, that maybe have had it installed for a number of years, and see what their experience has been with it. You might get some different opinions, but we're actually building now with spray foam. There's a couple of different projects. One, we're building a new office, and we are using spray foam to create an attic that has conditioned space, because in Texas, it's better to condition your attic and not create that temperature variance. That temperature variance can create a vapor problem in a lot of construction. So part of it depends on where you live too. But if you have a good, trustworthy spray foam installer who's been around for more than 10 years, I wouldn't hire a company that hadn't been doing it at least that long. Talk to them about the risks and the benefits, because there's risks with, when you're building a home, there's risks with everything you do. There's risks in absolutely everything, and no home is mold proof. It's, you're trying to build something solid, tight, that doesn't spring leaks, but houses break down, grounds settle, and you have things, mechanics can fail. And so, part of what you want to do is build a house solidly, but you also want to have a good maintenance program around that. If you go to moldjacked.com, we've got some good articles on how to kind of a checklist on what to do around your home to make sure that you basically manage your house properly, so that you reduce the risk of the potential for mold to grow. And there's a lot of tools that can be used for that. And I would certainly become versed in those things, because for many people, your home is your biggest investment that you'll ever make, and you want to make sure that you're taking care of it and maintaining it well. We've lost the art of that in our society today. Unfortunately, builders hire cheap labor. They make mistakes, and they're just not experienced, and they cut corners and they do things wrong. And so if we just built houses properly, I think most homes would be perfectly fine. But we're just not doing it that way. So you have to become a micromanager of your contractor when you're building, because they'll promise you a mold-free place, but all their promises don't mean anything, because they don't understand mold. Let's see here. How to treat toenail. I think we get this question every week. How to treat a fungus in the toenail. Well, if you've got fungus growing in your toenails, you're probably immunocompromised. So you've got to figure that out, because if you soak that toenail, and you can soak it in a number of things, tea tree oil and other thyme and oregano or antifungal. You could soak it in peroxide. All possible successful things that you can do. But if your immune system's weak, the fungus is just going to keep coming back. So, is your immune system weak? And if so, what's making it that? And for many people, the answer to that question is poor immune function is caused by poor diet. So you've got to really effectively, eat well, eat whole, real food that you're not allergic or sensitive to. Get plenty of sunshine, especially on that toe. Breathe clean air, drink clean water, go to bed on time, and exercise. And if you're doing those things effectively on a regular basis, you should have a robust immunity and not have to worry about repetitive toenail fungus. But if it's still there, you could be living in mold, and that could be causing or contributing to immunocompromisation. But soaking it in peroxide or tea tree or oregano or thyme, those are all options. You can also, follow up with your doctor, and there are antifungal drugs that many doctors like to prescribe. The azole antifungals, are options in that regard. So much pollen these days. What natural options do you have? We have a product called Histacyst that supports the immune system from environmental pollens and other grass dander and other things. That's probably the first thing I'd recommend. The second thing, especially if you have like allergy symptoms of excess histamine, I would recommend potentially thinking about taking DAO. We have a product called Ultra DAO, and DAO is an enzyme that degrades histamine. So you take it on an empty stomach, and it can help you degrade histamine as well. I did your nutrient testing and was deficient in practically everything except B12. The doctor even tested B12 and it shows 2000%, yet I'm highly iron deficient. What's going on? The number one cause of iron deficiency, let's just say the number one cause of undetermined iron deficiency is actually gluten. Gluten damages the stomach and intestines. Those two areas it damages the most readily are areas that iron is dependent upon for its absorption. So we see a lot of iron deficiency. It's actually the top deficiency symptom in people with gluten sensitivity. So if you're not gluten-free, you need to be, or at the very least, you need to look into it to make that determination. Get genetically tested or ask your doctor to test you. Lately, I have a lot of brain zaps, especially just before falling asleep. Can that be a deficiency? I do not take medication, so it's not from that. I do have anxiety symptoms, but not as bad. Brain zaps are very commonly mold, and I, I don't wish that on anyone, but that would be, something I would definitely want to possibly look into. Are you the only person in your household being affected, or other people in your household sick? Brain zaps can also be B vitamin deficiencies, folate, B12, electrolyte deficiencies can contribute to brain zaps as well. So I would, I'd be looking at all of those. If you're struggling with anxiety symptoms, there could be a number of nutrients that contribute to that. You might find benefit from our anxiety crash course, just as a starting point. If you're not gluten-free, I would definitely consider that, because gluten is another contributory factor in that. Is consistently high MPV, mean platelet volume, something to be concerned with at all? There's not enough context in that. I mean, if you have a high MPV every time you get it checked and all your other kind of general markers from your metabolic panel are normal, they got to understand those tests are they're nice information, but they're not comprehensive information. So it's hard to make any kind of determination from just looking at those kinds of tests in a vacuum and saying this could or couldn't be a problem. Because, I mean, platelet volume being high could contribute to problems. I mean, platelets aggregate together and clot your blood. And so now imagine your blood is too thick. And as you're trying to navigate the world and navigate your day, if your blood's too thick, your heart works harder. Your blood pressure can go up over time. You deliver less oxygen and less nutrition to your tissues. Those are all potential possibilities that could be problematic. But just having MPV with normal complete blood counts and normal chemistry panels it's not enough information to make that determination. So you really need to work with your doctor to get more additional testing done. They may want to refer you to a hematologist. That's a doctor that specializes in blood. Sometimes those guys are a little bit more comprehensive in looking and helping to see what's going on there. Let's scroll down. What's your thoughts on low-dose naltrexone? I think if you're having to pick low-dose naltrexone as an option to improve your health, then you're missing the point. Drugs don't cure disease. Methylene blue doesn't cure disease. Low-dose naltrexone doesn't cure disease. Those of you who are seeking to feel better, through pharmaceutical intervention, just because it's, more fringe, just because, some alternative doctors are recommending and doing these things doesn't make them right. That's my philosophy. I don't believe that we need drugs to be healthy. It's just, your body knows what to do. If you're still broken, it's because you're doing it wrong and you need to figure out what that is. And testing can come a long way to helping you figure that out. But I don't recommend the use of drugs indefinitely, as a standard approach to trying to feel better, without digging for the why. Where LDN can be, possibly helpful is in that person who has done absolutely everything working with their doctor. They've tried, uncovered every stone, and there's, technology has basically failed to find the reason as to why they may be struggling. And so all they're left with is that potential, maybe then. But, as a first item of, hey, let's try LDN, no, it's not a first line of defense for sure. What tests would you recommend for hormones for a 65-year-old lady that has some anxiety and restless nights? She has a whole food diet. She needs to balance hormones. Thoughts on bioidentical? Well, that's a lot, Betsy. There's a lot of different types of tests. It depends on which hormones you're talking about. There are different salivary tests, there are urine tests, there are blood tests. And then beyond the hormones, there's hormone receptors and hormone proteins that bind hormones. There's vitamins and minerals that help your body regulate the production of hormones and regulate how the hormones communicate to your cells. It's not as simple as just run this test to balance hormones. As far as whether or not bioidentical hormones can be helpful, it depends on the situation. If you've had, for example, if you've had a hysterectomy, you may be a candidate for bioidentical hormones. I think a lot of people, though, jump too quickly to hormone replacement therapy, and a lot of doctors jump too quickly to that as the solution. I don't think hormones should be the solution before nutrition. Nutrition's got to be investigated and dialed in first. And then, then potentially if there's still a problem, then hormones could be a potential possibility for a person. But it's pretty rare in my practice that, once we start addressing diet and lifestyle properly, I know you said you're eating a whole foods diet, and that's a great start. That's a great place to be. But are you missing things, or are you eating whole foods that you're actually reacting to and just don't know it? I mean, those are all potential possibilities that should be ruled in or out. Should humic with fulvic acid have a taste to it? Yeah, it does have a taste. It's basically dirt. It's decayed dirt. It's decayed plant matter that sits under rocks and gets dug out as a pasty dirt, and it tastes very earthy. Why is my wife burning ketones instead of fat? Well, I mean, ketones are a byproduct of burning fat. So I don't know what you mean in that regard. If she's blowing ketones, if she's got ketones coming out, usually that means that she's burning fat as fuel. What are your thoughts on peptides for healing? I think they're overrated. Clinically, I've seen them be overrated. I have people come to me all the time being pumped full of peptides, whether they're oral peptides or injectable peptides. These people, some of them found them helpful. Many of them found them not helpful at all. Ultimately, peptides are your body makes peptides. And what does it make peptides from? It makes them from amino acids. So it makes better sense philosophically to measure amino acid levels, because if a person doesn't have enough amino acids, or they're deficient in key amino acids, then their body's not going to be able to make peptides effectively. And so taking them exogenously through injectables or through orals, it's a trick. It's another trick, right? And so check your amino acids first. If you are well nourished and you have the right amino acids, you can make the peptides necessary to heal your body. So if you're looking at like BPC 147, 157, and some of the other things that people are using, like the GLP-1 stuff for weight loss. Again, that's not to say that they can't be helpful. It's just to simply say, if you're not changing your diet and your lifestyle and effectively addressing your nutrition, peptides are just as much of a medication as anything else. And they're not, anyway, you get into the situation, they're super expensive, and you end up addicted to peptides because you won't change your diet, or because you're not addressing the things you need to address. And it's just like, again, it's like with any other medication. Don't go down that rabbit hole of indefinite needing something that maybe you shouldn't need if you just would make the right changes. Let's see here. Which food intolerance test do you suggest for non-false negative results? I suggest a comprehensive one that's not just simply the ones that you don't want are the ones that just measure IgG. You get a ton of false positive on that type of test. We like to measure multiple antibodies with crossover. So IgE, IgA, IgM, IgG, specifically IgG subtype 4, are going to be better options. A lot of these ones that are online they're not very good. Is there a way to test and know exactly which type of gluten causes issues? Can someone be allergic to gliadin but not other types of gluten? You don't have an understanding of it. You're not allergic to gluten. It's not an allergy. It's a sensitivity, and that's a very, very big difference. An allergy is an IgE immune-related response where you make histamine against a food protein or an environmental protein that triggers an IgE response and a histamine release. Gliadin and gluten are sensitivities. It's a different arm of the immune system. It's a very different type of immunological reaction. And there are tests that some are doing that try to rule out the different types of gluten. Actually, there was a lab company years ago that took my work. They read my book, and then they took that data and then they tried to replicate it with a lab. I don't agree with that because the different types of glutens that I talked about in my book, and there are several different types. That's just a small drop in the well of how many glutens there are. Like for example, I think it was 2012, or I can't remember the year exactly, but they discovered 400 new different forms of gluten. There's not a single test that measures all those different forms of gluten. So if you're trying to do a test that says gliadin versus, say, corn zein versus, say, rice orzanin, there's some of that can be done, but I wouldn't use those as a determining factor to try to justify eating corn or justify eating, another grain. As a general rule of thumb, glutens have what we call homology, meaning the proteins are so similar that your immune system sees them and it sees evil. It sees something it doesn't want in the body. It's kind of like, when I say homology, I mean there's a similar shape amongst the gluten proteins, and so those different gluten proteins fit into that HLA-DQ antenna very readily and can trigger the immune response. So if you're gluten sensitive genetically and you have that predisposition, I don't recommend you eat grain. That's why the name of my book is No Grain, No Pain, not No Gluten, No Pain, because so many people get confused on that issue. Thoughts about nanohydroxyapatite? I don't like nano anything. I don't like synthetic nano anything. When they're making particulate that's so small that it can pass through your cellular barriers, to me, there's an unknown. And so I'm not using any of that kind of stuff. What do I do about bringing all my supplements to a new place after getting out of mold? Can I leave them in the container outside the house and go outside to use each day? Yeah, but you could also just you could use a microfiber and wipe them down. If the jars, are solid and sealed, you can wipe down the external. Hard, non-porous items can be wiped down and can be remediated, Barbara. The things we don't want to pull out of a moldy house would be, things such as curtains and big blankets and couches that have fabric, on the outside, or big mattresses. These things, it's just impossible to get all the mycotoxins out of them and not worth the risk. But if we're talking about hard, porous, non-porous items, those things can be wiped down and properly remediated. Let's see. Opinion on Pectisol for detoxification. I think it's fine. It's not the thing on the top of my list of choices, but I think Pectisol has some good benefits. I've been diagnosed with C to T. If you're talking about MTHFR mutations, so you've got two variants, I want to know how to determine the amount of methylfolate and B6 to take. Debbie, you don't take methylfolate and B6 if you have those gene mutations. just because you have those mutations. Let me put it that way. I have those mutations. I have the worst mutations you can have, and I don't take high dose methylfolate or high dose vitamin B6 on a daily basis. The genes themselves are not the problem, it's the environment. So if you have those genes and you subject yourself to a bunch of bad things in the environment, those genes can't dig you out of that hole of bad behavior. So that's where somebody might benefit from like more strong doses of 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate or methylated B9. But I mean, you can take them. They're relatively safe. In a good dose to start at for folate would be like 800, 800 micrograms. Vitamin B6, it just depends. It depends on how aggressive you want to get, but anywhere from 10 to 50s. P5P, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, would be a good place to start. But I just don't recommend that people get all these genetic tests and all these guys out there hawking, supplement your ears and your eyeballs out of your brain, because you have a mutation. Those guys, they're not clinicians. And they, I did this for 5 years. I made that mistake. And that's why I can share this with you, is that, and it's not, I'm not trying to talk bad about anyone, but you have to understand, I did this for 5 years where I tested genetic SNPs. I actually brought one of the first genetic tests to the market over 20 years ago. And we did 5 years of data collection on treating people's SNPs with B vitamins and other nutrients. But it's all based on a lot of it is based on the work of Bruce Ames, originally the father of SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. And it didn't work. And it didn't work because people were supplementing, but they weren't altering their diet. They weren't altering their environment. They weren't getting sunshine. They weren't going to bed on time. They weren't doing the fundamentals of good health. And you can't supplement yourself out of bad fundamentals. It's just not possible. So I hope that context gives you a little bit more help around the answer. But if you just want to take B6, 10 to 50 milligrams, you just want to take, folate, 800 micrograms a day, good places to start. Would be a natural approach to MGUS. I'm giving my husband up to 3 grams of curcumin supplement, and it seems to help with that. That's good. I'd make sure he's gluten-free because there's a relationship with gluten exposure and MGUS. So definitely consider that as well. Does raking leaves and weeding a garden count as working out? Maybe. It depends. I mean, how aggressively he's swinging that rake, how big is that leaf pile? How hard are you tugging on those weeds? It's definitely activity and movement. I wouldn't call it sedentarianism for sure. But if you try, it depends on what you're trying to do, Shannon. If you're trying to build new muscle, if you're trying to build new bone, I wouldn't put an osteoporotic woman to raking leaves and weeding her garden to try to correct her osteoporosis. But I would definitely encourage anyone to rake their leaves and weed their garden because it keeps them active and outdoors and breathing fresh air and getting sunshine. Let's see. If a child just got through with measles, oh, here we go, measles. What supplements or nutrition should they take to help support them? Good if they're healthy and they feel good, good multivitamin, a good omega-3, possibly a good probiotic. But I mean, look, measles is you're all hearing the panic right now. That's who somebody said it, I think the most succinctly. I was listening to somebody and they said, when you hear about disease pandemics on the news, it's basically just good pharmaceutical commercial advertising. It's fear porn. Go back and watch Leave It to Beaver and Brady Bunch. That tells you everything you need to know. That before the pharmacy had control over media, kids get the measles and they'd lay in bed for a few days with a rash. And then they'd be back up and running, and it was not a big deal. Nobody really thought of it as a big deal then either. I had the measles. Lots of kids had the measles. My kid had the measles. We didn't vaccinate at all, my youngest. So there's not like a need to do more as far as as far as health goes, just because somebody had the measles and got over the measles. Some would say you might check their vitamin A levels because vitamin A deficiency can increase the risk for viral infection. But follow the fundamentals: good diet, clean diet. Good multivitamin would be. But if the child is sickly and struggling, I would probably do some testing and go deeper and ask different questions. I'm taking, let's see here. If you've been taking high dose vitamin B6 for a year and then you developed the neuropathy after the fact and then your B6 came back high, you definitely want to stop taking high doses of B vitamins with vitamin B6 in them. But you could have neuropathy for many reasons. It's hard to really know for sure. I mean, you could have neuropathy because your vitamin B1 is low and your CoQ10 could be low and you could develop neuropathy. You could have low lipoic acid and that could cause neuropathy. You could have an impinged nerve root and that could cause neuropathy. It just depends. Can these things be fixed? Pulmonary fibrosis, Raynaud's, Sjogren's, scleroderma. Well, I mean, pulmonary fibrosis depends on how aggressive your lungs are scarred. You're not going to reverse what's already there, but, could you potentially halt the progression? I believe so. Raynaud's, yes, I've seen reversal of Raynaud's. Raynaud's is very frequently mold, very frequently gluten, very frequently too much oxalate. All as possibilities. Sjogren's, yes. Scleroderma, yes. Scleroderma, in my experience, is largely mold, gluten and mold. So if you're struggling with scleroderma and you haven't had those two things checked, I'd strongly encourage it. Let's see. Do you have a course on hormones? No. But I have a couple crash courses on hormones. You might watch those interviews, Betsy. We've done those on several different types of hormones, depending on what you're after. If high cholecystokinin causes hyperkinetic gallbladder, is there a way to fix it short of removing the gallbladder? Why do you have high cholecystokinin? That's the $1 million question that needs to be figured out, Debbie. Not removal of the gallbladder. This is no offense to you, Debbie. That's an asinine thing for a doctor to want to tell you to do, is to remove your organ because you have a high level of cholecystokinin. Instead of doing their job and trying to figure out why that's high, they just say, take out the organ. Just because you can survive without the organ doesn't mean that it should be removed. We learned that lesson with tonsils. That's why they don't do it anymore. It's a very rare thing now. It used to be a common thing to do would be to remove tonsils. Look at how many things that used to be common in medicine that are no longer common after they basically mangled people and made them worse off. And enough data was finally collected to say, stop doing this. Medicine is riddled with that kind of history. This is why we always go back to the wisdom of diet and lifestyle, the wisdom of sunshine and sleep and exercise and activity and clean air and clean water and clean food. Those are fundamental. Everything else is hype and marketing and somebody making money off of your grief and sorrow in ways that, are not always benign. And that's not to say all doctors are out to get your money and not help you, but sometimes the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and you have to have the wisdom and the discernment to be able to differentiate those things. Can someone with gluten sensitivity eat fermented and sprouted foods in kombucha? I'm not a fan of kombucha. I think kombucha is just alcohol, basically. If you want to eat fermented or sprouted foods, depending on what you're eating, you certainly can, just not fermented or sprouted gluten-based foods. A lot of hype going around the internet right now on eating sprouted grains is okay for people with gluten sensitivity, and those people are dangerous. It's not okay. What's the best protein to ingest if you have stage 3 kidney disease, chronic kidney disease? All protein. Look, protein doesn't wreck your kidneys. Your wrecked kidneys leak protein. It's not the same thing. Doctors blame chronic kidney disease on the consumption of protein. They're putting the cart, after the horse, so to speak. They're saying that your kidneys are leaking protein, therefore protein is causing the damage. And no, your kidneys are damaged, and therefore they're leaking protein. Your body needs protein to heal and repair. And what kind of protein that you ingest, everybody's different. Some people do better. There definitely are people that do better with plant-based proteins versus animal, and vice versa. There are people that do better with animal-based protein versus plant. And so the question it's not a one-size-fits-all, but you definitely need to have protein. And a lot of kidney doctors will tell you to avoid protein and go on low-protein diets. And if you want to seal your fate and your doom, go on a low-protein diet if you've got kidney failure. That's in my opinion, that's horrible advice. And anyway, I'll get off that horse. How to deal with elevated uric acid? Vitamin C is a really good thing to do. You could one of the best ways to lower uric acid naturally is using cherries. Tart cherries work fantastically well. But vitamin C and bioflavonoids work really well also. Anything I can do to help the healing process of a herniated disc that putting pressure on my sciatic nerve through nutrition. So you're trying to help yourself with nutrition to help that disc. So two things. If you've got a herniated disc, that is a physical traumatic injury, and you need to have some type of physical decompression, for it as you're doing the nutrition. In other words, nutrition by itself may not give you the full correction. You want to have some kind of mechanical traction or decompression to take the pressure off the disc. And there's a lot, you could do mechanical traction, you could do mechanical decompression, you could do inversion traction. So there's a lot of things you could do there. Find a good doctor that does that. Chiropractors are brilliant at herniated disc treatment. As far as nutrition is concerned, you got to make sure you got enough protein, particularly animal protein. Collagen would be a good thing to supplement with for sure. Vitamin C. You might consider proteolytic enzymes, high doses of omega-3, and I would definitely be on a good quality multivitamin with a good methylated B complex. Those are just kind of staple there. Beyond that, go get tested. Get your micronutrient levels tested. I've seen cases of disc herniation where the damnedest things would be deficient and be holding up that person's care. So copper deficiency, or even sometimes things you wouldn't expect, like manganese is showing up. And manganese is important for the quenching of free radicals that are released as a result of the damaged disc compressing the nerve, causing the release of different pro-inflammatory chemicals that are what cause that neuropathic pain going down your leg. So those things I mentioned, but also get a test done to measure your nutrition status and really support you where your body needs it. Relationship between methylation and psychiatric problems. Well, you can't, so methylation is a critical essential process in the human body required for producing neurochemicals, especially the neurochemical serotonin. And so when you're talking about problems like depression, can serotonin mismanagement cause depression or contribute to depressive psychiatric problems? Of course it can. So methylation is critical for that. So part of what methylation does is you've got methylfolate that adds context to helping tryptophan convert into serotonin, biochemically speaking. Did we do a crash course on neurotransmitters, Mel?
I think we did. Yeah.
If we did, I think we have that. You should watch that, because I go through the exact kind of biochemistry of nutrition as it relates to, to producing neurotransmitters that are critical, like dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, noradrenaline. All those are going to be important as an aspect to thinking about depression. But remember too that depression is an inflammatory condition, and methylation also has anti-inflammatory properties. The whole process of methylation, it's like a cogwheel with multiple cogs. And one of those cogs helps with serotonin. One of those cogs helps with manipulating certain amino acids like glycine into trimethylglycine and homocysteine and converting homocysteine into methionine, and then subsequently converting homocysteine into cysteine and subsequently glutathione, which is a potent antioxidant that helps quench inflammation in the brain. So that's a tremendous question, but there's probably more than what we had time today to talk about as far as mechanisms behind how it might help, but it's very important. Opioid detoxification, anything besides magnesium, omega-3 multivitamin, fluids, sleep. I would be doing high doses of vitamin B3 for opioid detoxification for sure, if you haven't added that or thought about adding that to that equation of things. I had German measles as a toddler. Could that have left some nasties behind that could contribute to my medical puzzle? Probably not. I was suffering from mycotoxin poisoning. I was very depressed and suicidal. After I saw a functional medicine doctor, she saved my life. My mental health returned to normal. Bella, thank you so much for sharing your experience there, because a lot of people are struggling in that same way like you, and your success may help them turn an ear toward looking for mycotoxins. I was told unless I removed my gallbladder, I would still have gallstones. Take some taurine. Take some vitamin C. You can't make proper bile without taurine and vitamin C. And a lot of people that develop gallstones have vitamin C deficiency, taurine deficiencies, and it wouldn't surprise me if you did too. Yeah, if you have your gallbladder removed, going back to that, you're going to malabsorb fat. End of story. You're not going to absorb vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, omega-3 as effectively. You're just not. Yeah, you'll live, you'll survive. You just, do you want to thrive or do you want to get by, right? Do you want, ask yourself the question, when you're hiring somebody to do a job for you, do you want them to do just a really mediocre job that just barely passes muster, or do you want them to do a fantastic job? So when a doctor tells you you don't need your organ and that you'll still be okay, maybe throw that back in their face. It's just, there's a lot of money when somebody has, there's a lot of money that exchanges hands when somebody has a gallbladder removed. And it's not usually to the benefit of the patient. I'll just say it that way. I had a hypothalamic hematoma. You mean hematoma? I don't know what a hematoma is, but if you mean hematoma, like a blood tumor, and now temporal lobe epilepsy, I have to take Klonopin. That's a mouthful of stuff, Gene. You need to go work with somebody in functional care that can do, an in-depth analysis of what's going on, because there's too much to unpack. It's just too big of a question. Good beginner ideas for non-inflammatory foods: meat from grass-fed or free-range animals, organic fruits, organic vegetables, nuts are all super easy things. Anti-inflammatory as far as, I'm going to say non-inflammatory. Any food can be inflammatory to anyone if they're allergic to it. But if we're just talking generalities, meats, fruits, vegetables, and nuts, all real, all organic, all non-GMO, and all not processed. That's a great place to start. Is there a vitamin good for circulation and thrombosis? Magnesium. Thrombosis, magnesium. Magnesium prevents platelet aggregation, so it's very important for blood viscosity. I'd also consider omega-3 fatty acids for that. EPA, tremendous at reducing platelet aggregation. What do you think about pyroluria in relation to mental disorders? I think some people have it. It's not super common, but I think it's overstated as a problem. This is my experience. Look, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not treating mental disorders as the staple of what I do. That being said, when I had Dr. Greenblatt on, he sees a lot more of it in his practice, I think, because, he's looking for it in a lot of people, and two, that's what he's treating. And so, but my experience is more treating neuromusculoskeletal problems versus mental problems. So in that regard, my realm of experience is that pyroluria in those situations are not as common. As far as mental disorders, is definitely a tremendous body of evidence scientifically about pyroluria in relation to mental disorders. And we know that zinc and vitamin B6 play a role in the production of neurochemicals. And without zinc and B6, neurotransmitter production can become skewed and altered and abnormal. How accurate is genetic testing for gluten sensitivity? 99.999 infinity %. My vitamin C was, let's see, my vitamin C, message recharge. What? Do you know the Walsh protocol? Yeah, I know the Walsh. I know Terry. She's a great doctor. We interviewed her a number of years ago. You can check that out in our expert interviews. But you're talking about Dr. Walls. I think maybe not the Walsh protocol, because maybe there's a typo there, but Walls protocol is what that should be. And that's a protocol for people with MS. It is very similar to the no grain, no pain diet. Her experience is very similar to mine in that regard. When you have people with chronic autoimmune neurological disease, get the grain out of their diet, get the dairy out of their diet, get the processed food, lower their carbohydrate intake, make sure they're eating whole, real, organic foods, meats, nuts, vegetables, fruits, as a general first place to start. Okay, what time is it?
2:15.
Okay, yeah, we went over again. Yeah, there's just more questions than we got time to answer. So, okay, look, thanks for tuning in today. I appreciate all of you coming every week and learning. I'd ask you a favor. You can support our mission. We're out to help save 100 million lives. You can support us in multiple ways. One, you can share this video, hit that like, subscribe, hit that thumbs up button. Those things all help. But come visit me. Come visit me either at glutenfreesociety.org. If you want to learn about how to overcome autoimmunity with diet and lifestyle, that's the starting place. Read No Grain, No Pain. Start there first. If you want to support our mission and help us keep doing good works, we appreciate your business. Come visit our store at Gluten Free Society. We have over 100 products, supplements that you can try, that you can use. So if you're in the market for supplements and you're looking for something gluten-free and high quality, come check us out. If you're looking for lab testing to determine whether or not you have gluten sensitivity or check your vitamin and mineral status, we offer those as well, and we appreciate your business. This week, we're actually offering a sale on those. Do we have a word?
It is test 15.
Test 15.
15% off.
Okay, so yeah, test 15. If you are looking to do nutrition testing and you want to save money in the process, you get a 15% discount this week using promo code TEST15. So that's on micronutrient and gluten testing. So, yep, we appreciate your support. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. We'll be back here next week for another crash course. And again, on Thursday of next week for another live Q&A. We're here every Thursday minus holidays. And encourage you to come. Next time you come, bring a friend, and let's get the world changed. Let's move this paradigm forward, and let's make America healthy again without government intervention. Have a great weekend.